Welcome to episode 3 of Film Chats, conversations with Ottawa's film, TV, and media community, presented by Digi60 Filmmakers Festival. I'm Samphe Ballamingie, a student of sociology at Carleton University and an emerging filmmaker. Over the past few months, I've sat down with some fabulous professionals here in Ottawa to talk about issues of representation in the film industry. Today I'm chatting with Maissa Houri. Maissa is an Arab-Canadian, award-winning independent filmmaker and actress. Maissa recently released an award-winning web series that challenged the norms of society by telling the story of a sexually freed Muslim woman living with her gay roommate. Her second short film, Inara, has warranted her many directing awards. I hope you enjoy this episode with Maissa Houri. Hi Maissa, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, I'm an actor and a filmmaker based in Ottawa, and I'm the new director of women's industry for Digi60.
Amazing. And I was wondering if you could give us like a brief overview of how you first knew you wanted to get into visual storytelling.
I started out as an actor. I've always wanted to be an actor my whole life. As a kid, I was always in plays, doing all that. So that was my ultimate goal, was to be an actor. When I went to college, my program was theater and film, so I did a lot of studying different international films and behind the scenes and camera work, all that, and I really, really liked that. But my ultimate goal was still to be an actor until I realized that the film industry wasn't as diverse as it should be, and my people, I guess, weren't represented, and the roles were very, very, very limited for myself. So that's where I started to tell my own stories.
Could you tell me a bit about your background and identity?
Yeah, so my father is Syrian, my mother's Lebanese. They immigrated to Montreal in the late 70s. They're both Muslim. When we do see diverse representation, they're all stereotyped. Right now everyone's on this bandwagon of refugees, so they're all refugee stories. But what about the immigrants who've been here for a long time, who've built their lives here in Canada or in the States, and have worked really hard to grow with the community, with Canadians? And my parents have been here since the 70s, and they've grown. We grew up with the first generation, and there's none of that represented at all. And as an actor, they're always like, play on your stereotypes. I'm like, but I don't want to always play the refugee and the covered Muslim and the terrorist wife, or and it's kind of ridiculous. And a lot of people, especially in the States and the Midwest America, when they don't really watch the news, they're taking their information from movies and television, so they're going to see us misrepresented. They're going to think we're all bad people, and that's just not what our culture is about. Our culture is about food and family and love, and people just don't see that because we're just not representing cultures properly.
And are there ways that gatekeepers can create better supports for...
We need to change the gatekeepers.
Yeah, change the gatekeepers?
Yeah, I think, it's pretty white male dominated, up there, and I think that's where the lack is. I mean, Rami Malek, who is in Mr. Robot, he was saying, the producer that opened the door for him was Egyptian, and if it wasn't for him, he wouldn't be where he is. So we need the diverse gatekeepers, and we don't have that.
How do you think visual representation can reach people in ways that written representation can't, or in different ways?
Growing up, I didn't see anybody that I identified with on TV except for Jasmine. And she was voiced by, a white woman, and even the new Aladdin movie, she's not Arab either. So, the people that you're supposed to identify with, I didn't grow up thinking, seeing anybody that I could identify with. I feel like that's so important, because you want people of color to grow up knowing that that could be me, or I see myself in these people. Not just, I have a friend of mine, she's an actress, and she's Latina, and she's normally the maid, and the first time she's not a maid, she's in a movie, she's something more like a congresswoman. I was like, we high-fived, we're like, yay, you're not a maid for the first time, that's amazing. And so we want to show that Latinas are not just maids or nannies, or Arabs are not just terrorists, that we're more than just the stereotypes that are imposed on us. And so I feel like, kids growing up can say, hey, that could be me, or I see myself in these people, and that's normal, and that's okay.
And I was wondering, could you tell me a bit about your first creative project? And was there any lessons that you learned from that project?
So the first project I wrote when I was pregnant. So I wrote it for my friend of mine who is Romanian, and he wanted to be an actor, and he has an accent, and being an actor in the industry and working with my talent agent, I know that accents are very limited in all the roles, and he couldn't be submitted for a lot of things. So I said, I'm going to write you something. So I wrote a film about a guy wanting to be an actor and, pursuing it, but he was very limited to because of his accent, and it's called Russian Gangster. So it's just to show a bit of the racism in Hollywood and how they're like, you know what, if I was casting for a Russian gangster, I'd hire you, but you're not a romantic lead.
What was the process like with that first project? How did you kind of like dive into it?
I just started writing, and I was like, I wrote based on him, and then I wrote 2 other characters based on people that I knew. So my brother was in it, and a friend of mine. So I based it, just on who they are. So I wanted to be as natural as possible. I didn't want it to be out there. I wanted to be as I really wanted to reflect the situation. I had been an actor in a web series, and the director and the filmmaker for that helped me make this one, because I helped a lot on his series.
Amazing. So you had like that collaboration already, kind of like the foundation.
Absolutely,
there.
yeah, and he like mentored me a little bit, so he really helped, pave the way for my new filmmaking career.
And what has the journey been like from that first creative project to now you're like an established filmmaker? Was it a linear path? Was it more zigzagging?
It just, I just kept trying for the next project. So then when Digi60 came up, it was my first Digi, spring 2018, and I was a little nervous, but I'm like, you know what, I'm gonna do it. And so I asked a friend of mine who's a photographer, and I said, would you be my cinematographer? And I said, I'm only gonna do this if you do it with me. And we signed up, and then I won the Female Filmmaker Award, and we tied for Best Director.
When we bring to the fore these previously silenced voices, we get a broader range of stories and perspectives. I'm wondering how we can ensure that these stories are told.
The opportunities need to be given, and I feel like there's not a lot of that right now. Especially like we're just not as, I guess, privileged to have networked with the right people or the gatekeepers, I guess. So
I'm wondering how you view your craft and how you manage to combine financial livelihood with self-expression.
Everything that I do to reflect how representation. I created a web series called Dirty Love. It has a big LGBTQ storyline. It's about our Muslim woman who ends up selling sex toys, and and that's very taboo in the culture, and we're pushing boundaries.
Where can we find Dirty Love?
It's on YouTube.
It's on YouTube?
Yeah,
okay,
Dirty Love series. Yeah.
How do you find people to collaborate with on these projects?
Ottawa has a lot of talented people. Yeah. So, I've just, from projects, doing different web series and different short films, you get to know people and who you want to work with. And then when you work with them, sometimes you don't want to work with them later. You just kind of get to know who's who and what they do, and you just learn that way, and you make connections, and you just, you find your tribe, and you work with them, and you create awesome work with that.
Amazing. We live in this visual age when images are really fleeting, and I'm wondering if you have any tips for making sure that images are long-lasting and durable.
I think just making everything beautiful from a different perspective as well. I think that you need to break out of that stereotypical Hollywood look, and I think looking at independent films and looking at European films and foreign films, they have a different perspective on the way they do things, and the visual storytelling is so beautiful, and I think that's what would make long-lasting images. I think that just has a different impact.
A film that I love, Mustang, has stayed with me partially because it's just so beautifully shot, every shot.
Oh yeah.
And also tells a story that I hadn't seen before.
Exactly. So some films they stay with you. There's a film called The Fall I had seen years ago, and it's just such a it's so beautiful to look at. The colors are bright, and just the way it's filmed is so different. And it's just they just stay with you, and you just think about those. And I think that's really important, is that if you just have a different perspective, and I feel like if you are, travel the world and see the world from a different perspective, that you will translate that onto screen.
I'm wondering if there is something that makes you hopeful about the future of greater representation and diversity in film, if you're seeing anything at the moment.
It's getting there. Things are changing a little bit, but they're like baby steps, and I feel like that, I feel like people need to put themselves out there and just keep creating and raise their voices to fight for the representation on screen, and I think eventually get there. But I think we need to fight, raise our voices to make that impact, to make our voices heard, to change the landscape of what on screen looks like.
Do you have any advice or tips for emerging or established filmmakers who want to break in or continue working in this industry?
Network, do the workshops, show up at the film festivals and the events that they put on. pick people's brains, talk to them, you know, ask them questions, go on YouTube, see like the different courses they have on there. There's so much, you know, out there now that you can basically be self-taught. Start by, you know, talking to people and create your first film, and then you learn from your mistakes, and then you get better, and better and better and better, and eventually, like, your, you know, everything, your perspective changes, the way you filmmake changes, but, you know, start from somewhere and keep growing.
The sentiment of like not hesitating and actually like diving into projects seems to be echoed like across everyone that we've talked to. Just like so many people are hesitant to starting their first project.
I feel like, especially women, I feel like women are too scared to take that step. Like, oh, I'm not good enough, I'm not good enough. I feel like a lot of women have that, you know, sentiment, and I feel like you just go and do it. You know, you don't know what the outcome is going to be like. When, you know, with Digi60, when I did like Inara, like I sat there like this, like the whole time, like I was so scared, but you know, you just go out and do it and you hope for the best.
I mean, it doesn't have to be perfect, because you're going to learn lessons from it regardless.
Exactly. You know, everyone wants to hide their first short film, you know. After a while, you're like, oh, why did I do this and why did I do that? But I mean, you just got to go and try, and you learn. It's all about learning. It's never ending.
I mean, hopefully you're looking back at your first film and you're thinking, why did I do this? Because it means that you progressed from that stage.
And you learn, like, oh, I would have done this differently. Now I know, like, what I did wrong, or we could change that for the next one. And, you know, I feel like that's the advice I'd give.
And my final question is, what are you working on right now?
I'm working on a series that I'm writing and hoping that will make it out there, and of course it has representation, and it's usually I usually write about Arab Canadians, so that's what it's going to be about. I don't want to like talk too much about it, but that's really what it's. I usually try to put myself in there, because as a filmmaker, I also want to be an actor, and I always put myself in these things. So I write myself in the in anything I write. So
that's awesome.
It's always going to be about Arab Canadians.
That's a good little teaser. I'm excited to see it.
And a comedy, because I'm trying to, you know, change the narrative. So I'm trying to make it not dramatic. I want it to be funny, and I want people to see what, you know, first generation Arab Canadians and a lot of like immigrants can like definitely identify with that. But just to see what it's like living here in Canada, and just I want people to see a different side of us, and how funny and fun we can be.
Sounds like a wonderful project. Yeah, I can't wait to watch it. Awesome. Thank you, Maissa, so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
That was my chat with Maissa Houri. I hope you enjoyed it. A huge shout out to our 2020 festival partner, Saw Video, for sponsoring this series. For more information about the festival, visit digi60.org. We'd like to keep the conversation going. Engage with us on Facebook at Digi60 Filmmakers Festival, on Twitter at Digi60Fest, and on Instagram at Digi.60, and let us know what you would like to learn about next. I'm Samphe, and I'll chat with you soon.